Hello everybody and welcome back to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name is Martin and today we are once again joined by two other Magic content creators, PJ from Commander Replay and Scott, otherwise known as Savantier. But before we begin, I'd like to thank all of our wonderful Patreon supporters whose donations help to keep the channel going. You folks are the real MVPs. Also, if you're planning on buying any products from these websites, then be sure to use our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you any extra, but it really helps out the channel. And finally, if you haven't checked out our latest sponsor, altersleeves.com, then do yourself a favour and click our link in the video description. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Well, with that out of the way, let's jump straight into the action and take a look at those opening hands.
I am playing my Omnath Locus of Creation deck, which has a heavy emphasis on ramp and landfall effects. I also have a few landfall specific combos hidden in the deck for when raw power alone isn't enough to close out the game. My opening hand consists of Lotus Cobra, Mina and Den Wildborn, Sky Shroud Claim, Command Tower, Windswept Heath, Sunpetal Grove, and Breeding Pool.
I am playing my Wyleth Soul of Steel equipment deck, the goal of which is very simple: equip a load of weapons to my commander and swing for lethal. I also run a healthy amount of protection spells, as without creatures to attach my equipment to, I have very little chance of winning the game. I keep an opening hand containing Steel Shaper's Gift, Swords to Plowshares, Core Blade Master, Mask of Avacyn, Swiftfoot Boots, Evolving Wilds, and the Plains.
PJ is playing his Aurelia the War Leader Angel Tribal deck. Similarly to me, PJ wants to be ramping hard in order to cast those high mana cost creatures as soon as possible, and runs a metric ton of mana rocks to help him do just that. His opening hand contains a land tax, Dowsing Dagger, Archangel Avacyn, Acroma Angel of Fury, War Room, Sacred Foundry, and a mountain.
And finally, Scott is playing his Adeliz the Cinderwind Wizard Tribal deck. His strategy is to hit hard and fast with low CMC creatures using a bunch of 1 and 2 mana pump spells to power up his attackers. His opening hand is made up of Fire Diamond, Harbinger of the Tides, Lightning Stormkin, Temple of the False God, 2 islands, and a mountain.
PJ wins the die roll and pays 2 life to play an untapped Sacred Foundry. He then casts a turn 1 Soul Ring, which he uses to cast Dowsing Dagger.
Now that is an explosive start to the game.
PJ gifts Martin with a pair of 0/2 plant tokens with the dagger's ETB, and with nothing more to do, passes to Scott.
Scott plays Temple of Enlightenment, keeping the top card of his library where it is with his Scry trigger. Unable to do anything else, he passes the turn.
I play Breeding Pool, having the Shock Land enter tapped, and end my turn.
I play Evolving Wilds and pass to PJ.
PJ begins his turn by casting a morphed card.
Ooh, how mysterious.
He then plays War Room and passes the turn.
Scott plays a mountain and casts Fire Diamond. Out of mana, he ends his turn.
I play Command Tower, which I use to help cast Lotus Cobra. I then pass to Martin, who responds by sacrificing his Evolving Wilds. He searches library for a mountain, puts the land onto the battlefield, and then moves to his turn.
I play a Plains and cast Core Blade Master. Safe behind a wall of blockers, I pass the turn.
PJ plays Battlefield Forge and equips Dowsing Dagger to his morphed creature. Moving to combat, he attacks Scott with his morph, dealing him 4 damage, and transforming the Dowsing Dagger into Lost Veil.
So PJ has 8 mana on turn 3.
Yup.
Blimey.
In his second main phase, he casts Land Tax, because he apparently needs more mana, followed by a Ketra's Monument. Finally, out of ramp spells, PJ ends his turn.
Scott plays an island, casts Arcane Signet, and then uses his signet to help cast Lightning Stormkin. Moving to combat, Scott gets revenge on PJ for attacking him last turn, dealing him 2 damage with his Hasty Elemental Wizard. Unable to do anything else with his remaining mana, Scott passes to Alex.
I play Sunpetal Grove, creating a red mana with my Snake's Landfall trigger. I then use this mana and all of my lands to cast my commander, Omnath, Locus of Creation. I draw a card with the Elemental's ETB, and with nothing more to do, pass to Martin.
I play a mountain and tap out to cast my commander, Wyleth, Soul of Steel. Next I move to combat and attack PJ with Core Blade Master. PJ takes 2 damage and I pass the turn.
PJ plays a mountain and then ends his turn without doing anything else. Now, if that doesn't scream suspicious, I don't know what does.
Scott plays an island and casts Gadwick the Wizened, where X is 3. He draws 3 cards, moves to combat, and attacks Alex for 2 with his Stormkin. Unable to block, Alex takes 2, and Scott passes to Alex.
I play Windswept Heath, gaining 4 life from Omnath and generating a red mana with Lotus Cobra. Next, I cast Omnath, Locus of the Royal, and target PJ's Morph with my new Omnath's ETB. With the ability on the stack, PJ responds by flashing in Archangel Avacyn, granting his Morph indestructible until the end of turn. Avacyn's arrival also triggers a Ketra's Monument, creating PJ a 1/1 warrior token with Vigilance, and the rest of the stack resolves uninterrupted. Not to be deterred, I pay 1 life and sacrifice my fetch land to put Plateau into play from my library. This triggers my 3-colour Omnath and I put a +1/+1 counter on my commander this way. I then create 5 mana thanks to the combined effects of my 4-colour Omnath and my Cobra, 4 of which I used to cast Mina and Den Wildborn. This allows me to play an additional land, and I pop Hallowed Fountain onto the battlefield, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. I add a green mana to my mana pool with Lotus Cobra, deal everybody 4 damage with Omnath, Locus of Creation, and put a +1/+1 counter on Omnath, Locus of the Royal with his ability. Still not finished, I move to combat, where I attack Scott with my commander. He declares no blocks, takes 5 damage, and I then pass the turn.
Finally. I play a Plains and cast Swords to Plowshares, targeting Alex's commander.
Rude.
Quiet you. The Elemental is exiled, Alex gains 5 life, and I then cast Swift Foot Boots, immediately equipping the stylish footwear to Wyleth.
Much fashion, very swift.
Moving to combat, PJ offers not to block this turn's attacks in thanks for dealing with Alex's commander. I accept this gracious offer, sending Wyleth in his direction and drawing a card thanks to the core's ability. PJ takes 4 damage thanks to the double strike granted by my Bladesmith, and I end my turn. PJ responds to this by activating his War Room, paying 2 life to draw a card, and then proceeds to his turn.
PJ's land tax doesn't trigger in his upkeep, given that nobody has more lands than him.
Such a crying shame.
Indeed. He then draws, plays Command Tower, and moves to combat. Here he attacks me with his Morph and Avacyn, and then flips his Morph face up, revealing it to be a Chroma, Angel of Wrath. I take 10 damage given that I cannot block the flyers, and PJ moves to his post-combat main phase. Here he pays 2 life to draw a card with War Room, and passes to Scott.
Scott starts his turn by casting Goblin Electromancer, triggering Gadwick's ability. He uses the Wizard's trigger to tap the currently untapped Omnath, and then casts Dreadhorde Arcanist, which sadly does not trigger his Wizened Wizard. Moving to combat, Scott attacks me with Lightning Stormkin, dealing me 2 damage. Happy with his plays, Scott then passes the turn.
I begin my turn by playing Glacial Fortress, putting a +1/+1 counter on my remaining Omnath and generating a green mana. Next I cast Skyshroud Claim, putting 2 basic forests into play for my library, 2 more +1/+1 counters on Omnath, and adding 2 red mana to my mana pool with Lotus Cobra. I then draw 2 cards with Omnath, given that I now possess 8 lands, and then cast Tempt with Discovery. Both Scott and Martin accept my offer, but PJ rudely rejects my kindness to maintain the moral high ground. Martin puts Temple of the False God into play, Scott finds himself Command Tower, and I put Oberon, Palace in the Clouds, Cinderglade, and Ghost Town onto the battlefield. This triggers Omnath and my Snake 3 times, drawing me 3 cards, putting 3 +1/+1 counters on my Elemental, and adding 3 more mana to my mana pool. Once everyone has finished shuffling, I play Wooded Foothills as my second land drop, generating another mana, drawing another card, but forgetting to put another +1/+1 counter on Omnath.
That's what you get for having so many triggers in one turn.
I then pay a life, sacrifice a fetch land, and put Canopy Vista into play, drawing, gaining 1 more mana, and once again forgetting about my +1/+1 counter trigger.
Double oops.
Not yet finished, I use all my floating mana to cast Acidic Slime, destroying Oketra's Monument with the Ooze's ETB. Want to get the most value out of my turn as physically possible, I cast the Mending of Dominaria. I mill 2 cards, and lacking any creatures in my graveyard to return to my hand, move to combat. Here I attack Scott with my Swole Omnath, and he decides not to block, taking 10 damage. Happy with my position in the game, I end my turn.
It's about time. In my turn, I cast Steel Shaper's Gift, searching my library for Hammer of Nazan and putting it into my hand. I then cast the hammer, having it attach itself to Wyleth with its ETB, and then cast Commander's Plate, which I also have attached to my commander thanks to the effects of my hammer. Moving to combat, I attack Alex with my now 7/5 hexproof indestructible double strike protection from blue, black and green commander. I draw 3 cards with Wyleth's attack trigger, and given that Alex is unable to block, he takes 14 damage. In my second main phase, I play the Needle Spire that I just drew, and satisfied with what I've managed to accomplish in my reasonably timed turn, I pass to PJ.
Land tax triggers in PJ's upkeep, and PJ puts 3 basic lands into his hand from his library. Next he finally casts his commander, Aurelia the War Leader, striking fear into the heart of Martin and I, who have played against PJ's Angel before. PJ then plays a Plains and moves to combat. Here he attacks me with Aurelia, Avacyn, and Acroma,
The A-Team.
dealing me 13 damage and dropping me down to a single-digit life total. Aurelia's ability then triggers, untapping all of PJ's creatures and then moving him over to a second combat phase. Here he once again attacks me with Aurelia and Avacyn, dealing me 7 damage and knocking me out of the game. Lacking any further combat steps, PJ passes the turn.
A very worried looking Scott begins his turn by asking me if I want to team up to take down PJ, but I swiftly reject his offer, informing him that I should be able to one-hit KO PJ next turn without his help.
I can finish him off next turn anyway.
What? Okay, cool.
Ooh, tough talk over here.
Scott then casts his commander, Adeliz the Cinder Wind, followed by one of my favourite blue removal spells, Rapid Hybridization. Adeliz triggers, giving all of Scott's wizards +1/+1, and Archangel Avacyn is chosen as the target of the removal spell. Scott then taps Aurelia with Gadwick's ability, and PJ responds by casting Sajiri Shelter, giving Avacyn protection from blue. Not ready to throw in the towel just yet, Scott responds by flashing in Veldikin Aethermage, this time targeting Avacyn with Gadwick's tap trigger. PJ has no further responses to this, and so Archangel Avacyn is tapped before gaining protection from blue until the end of turn. Still not finished, Scott casts Temur Battle Rage, targeting Gadwick with the instant. This once again triggers Scott's commander, giving his creatures +1/+1, and the now 5/5 Wizened Wizard gains double strike and trample. Scott then moves to combat, and I promise him that if he doesn't kill me, I will knock PJ out of the game next turn and will leave Scott untouched. He agrees, attacking me with Adeliz and sending the rest of his army at PJ. Dreadhorde Arcanist's attack trigger activates, and Scott decides to cast the Temur Battle Rage in his graveyard, once again triggering Adeliz's ability. All of his creatures get a +1/+1 buff, and Scott targets his commander with the Battle Rage, giving her double strike and trample. I am unable to block given that Adeliz has flying, and PJ blocks Gadwick with Acroma and Goblin Electromancer with his warrior. Damage then occurs, I take 10, and PJ takes 15 thanks to Gadwick trampling over Acroma. Safe in the knowledge that I won't be attacking him next turn, Scott ends his turn.
In Martin's upkeep, Avacyn's ability triggers, transforming her into Avacyn the Purifier. The newly enraged Avacyn deals 3 damage to each other creature, Scott and Martin, destroying all of Scott and Martin's creatures except for Wyleth. Not too distraught, Martin plays a Plains and casts Spirit Mantle. He enchants his commander, giving him a +1/+1 buff and protection from creatures, and then casts Basilisk's Collar, immediately attaching it to Wyleth with Hammer of Nazan's ability. Moving to combat, Martin attacks PJ with his 8/6 commander with Indestructible, Haste, Hexproof, Death Touch, Lifelink, Protection from White, Blue, Black, and Creatures. He draws 5 cards with Wyleth's ability, and unable to block or target the attacking core with spells, PJ is forced to think outside the box to not die to combat damage. He responds by casting Swords to Plowshares, targeting his own Avacyn, and Martin responds by casting Path to Exile, also targeting the Purifying Angel. Avacyn is exiled by Martin's spell, PJ's life-gaining spell fizzles, and PJ takes 8 damage, knocking him out of the game. Martin gains 8 life thanks to his commander's life link, and then moves to his second main phase. Here he casts Sword of Vengeance, attaches it to Wyleth, and passes to Scott.
Scott plays a mountain and casts Ogre of Bolus. He looks at the top 3 cards of his library, revealing one of them to be Opt, and puts the instant into his hand. Next, Scott casts Harbinger of the Tides, but is unable to target my commander due to him having Hexproof, Protection from Blue, and Protection from Creatures.
So much protection.
Still not finished, Scott casts Kasmina, Enigmatic Mentor. He uses her -2 ability to create a 2/2 wizard, draws, discards, and passes the turn.
Martin plays a Plains and casts Black Blade Reforged. Is that really necessary?
Yes.
He attaches the sword to his multi-weapon wielding core, giving him an extra +8/+8, and then moves to combat. Here he attacks Scott with his now 18 power commander, lowering the wizard wielding player's life total to 0 and winning the game.
And that's it for another game. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. Don't forget that you can help to support the channel in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. Also, if you really like our content, then consider checking out our Patreon page, where you can find rewards for as little as $1 a month. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you next time. Stay awesome.